Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate your time, attention, and consideration for the topic we have. We will be talking today about the recovery experience with our patient navigator, Brian Biddings, and the assistant patient navigator, David DeCamp. Thank you both for being here. Thank you for giving your time away. And I look forward to sort of learning something and having a good conversation about, the topics we're learning. So David, will you going first? Share your screen and do what you need to
Sure.
do.
Absolutely. Want to welcome everybody and everyone who's watching after the fact on our YouTube channel. Just to have two guys that are, in recovery, that are fortunate enough to be able to work in the field, trying to direct other folks that are, either beginning or expanding their recovery journey along the way. I'm just going to, a couple of talking points that we kind of focused on is very important. To offer a perspective from people that are in recovery as opposed to the, quote, scientific or perhaps a clinical perspective. There's plenty of great material out there, on the clinical aspects of addiction and treatment methodologies and modalities. But, one of the things that has really taken hold is the idea that recovery is definitely enhanced and augmented by having people who are in recovery actually able to share their experience and their struggles. And, for me, that was a long process. So I'm going to share a little bit of that in my first topic, which I'm going to bring up now. So I'll give it a second to load up on the screen. I do have a background in, professional IT and sales. So I live by PowerPoint and die by PowerPoint. Although I promise that I'm not going to do too much in terms of PowerPoint. Just by introduction, my name is Dave DeCamp. I have a bachelor's degree actually in computer science and engineering. And I'm also a certified peer recovery specialist. I've been a recovering alcoholic and addict, in my current stint of recovery since very early 2016. So I just coming up on about 5.5 years. However, I have struggled with recovery in the past. I was first introduced to recovery in 1998 at the age of 37, and it did not stick. And the next, obviously, like roughly 18 years, I had periods of recovery and abstinence, holding on by the skin of my teeth or, white knuckling it. And I had long periods where I was actively drinking and using again. I had over a 30-year career in information technology development and technical sales support, which I lost in 2012. After 2.5 years of sobriety, within 6 months after picking up, I lost that job. I lost the job. I lost the career. I picked up legal consequences, and that actually has precluded me from going back to work in that field, which today I'm actually grateful for because I get to work in a field that actually makes a meaningful difference, and being able to, hopefully have people avoid some of the pitfalls that I've been through. I did enter the private recovery field in 2018 when I was about 2.5 years sober. I felt solid enough in my recovery that I felt I had a message that was worth hearing. And I did that entering the private treatment industry. While I was doing that, I began working with Mercer Council as an outside per diem peer recovery specialist for the opioid overdose recovery program. I started that in February of 2019. And then I was actually brought on to staff full-time in November of 2019, where I became the assistant navigator helping Brian. It's way more than a one-man job. We have dealt with over 1,000 cases since 2017 in Mercer County with a team of, on average, about 6 or 7 recovery specialists and 1 patient navigator. So we've been able to make a significant impact. So one of the topics that, you can't talk about addiction without talking about denial. And often, everyone focuses in on the substance, when there's a substance use disorder issue, right? And unless you dig deeper behind the disease aspects of addiction, you don't really understand that the addict is often the last person to really know that they have a problem. Okay. Now, in modern clinical terminology, we talk about, the stages of change, the 5 stages of change, which are pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action and maintenance, right? Where you go through a recovery process and you basically go through a transformation into someone that had no defense against using every day into somebody that has a toolkit that can prevent them from using every day. As long as they maintain that toolkit and use the tools, okay? But in the end, the fact of the matter is, since addiction was first studied and recovery programs first started popping up in the mid to late 1930s, the medical community has not come up with a cure for substance use disorder. The only recommendations that they can make is entire abstinence from the substances of choice. And it's all the magic behind that that makes it happen. And what fights that every step of the way, and I've lived through every one of these phases or stages or dimensions of denial. The first one is obviously refusing to recognize that you have a problem at all. I don't have a problem. Looking back on my own history, I became a daily drinker around college age. And so from 21 to 37, I basically drank alcohol every day and had numerous minor issues, but no catastrophic losses. I worked in a field where, work hard and play hard was glorified. We worked 60, 70, 80-hour weeks, and we were expected to go out and entertain our clients and party with them and things of that nature. And, my alcohol use wasn't a negative to me. I considered it a symbol of pride. So it was not a problem. It was an expectation of the job. Okay. But what I did have was a faulty blame thrower. What problems I did have, whether they were resulting from my drinking or not, was that over time, my alcoholism and the other drugs that went around it allowed me to start pointing fingers elsewhere because I didn't want to look at the problem. So everyone and everything else in my life is my problem. My spouse, my kids, my job, my coworkers, not getting that promotion, blah, blah, blah. Never looking at the fact that perhaps I was, impairing my own performance in all those capacities and roles. The self-serving, I deserve this because I work hard and I deserve downtime. These are all rationalizations around addiction. Once I got to the point where I was recognizing that there might be an issue, I graduated to different levels of denial. Yeah, I may have an issue, but it's only affecting me. It's not affecting my job or those around me. I still have my job, my car, my house. So if anything, I'm a functional alcoholic addict, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, which in turn eventually became, I have an issue for sure, but my use is justifiable due to the horrible circumstances, never looking at those circumstances were mostly caused by my drinking and drugging. Then the comparison trap, my consequences are not as bad as some people, so I'm not that bad. That's what hit me when I came in, started working a 12-step fellowship back in '98. I came in, I still had the good job. I still had, the big house in Robbinsville. I still had the cars. I was paying for my kids to go to private school. And I would look around at, the people with 8 DUIs or that had been homeless in Kensington. And I would say, well, that's not me. I just need to stick around, get my drinking back under control, and stop doing the hard drugs, and I'm going to be okay. I didn't realize I had long crossed that line where I was ever going to be able to make those types of, changes on my own. Or that if X, Y, or Z happened, I could always stop. Like if I got if I got a DUI, I would stop. Well, guess what? Over my drinking career of 30 something years, I ended up getting 3 of them. And none of them were significant. The last one happened to be in 2002. And I didn't get sober this time until 2016. So that should tell you something about the power of denial in addiction. Okay. Another common one that we run across all the time is that I'm only using my prescriptions and not street drugs, so I don't have a problem. Hey, alcohol is legal. Hey, weed's legal now. And as long as I don't buy cocaine, but I talk my way into a doctor's office and get a prescription for Adderall because it helps me focus better, and it's a stimulant. It's like methamphetamine. Guess what? I don't have a problem that requires correction. Then there's that point of sort of surrender. You realize that the addiction has you, but the addiction still wants you to keep going on. I definitely have an issue, but honestly, I don't care anymore. My life sucks so bad at this point. I don't really care. Just leave me alone. And then the epiphany moment, that can be a bottom for some. holy cow, I have an issue and I want to stop, but I can't actually stay away from it for one day. So what's the use? I might as well just continue and try to manage the best I can. Once I realized that, and learned, by going to 12-step programs, that a lot of the things that supposedly drove my addiction were childhood trauma and social anxiety and all kinds of other things. Not being ready to throw in the towel on my solution to life, I tried counseling and other issues, and other mechanisms, thinking that if I addressed certain other things clinically, went on antidepressants, that maybe that would, allow me to drink like a normal human being. Never really looking at the fact that, hey, maybe I'm depressed because I'm putting massive amounts of depressants followed by stimulants in my system. And then the addiction swapping and balancing phase. Well, if I only do X and Y, but not Z, I can function that way, as opposed to actually looking at, what the solution would be. It was hard to stop, it was ridiculously hard to stop. Well, I'm addicted, so I'm just going to go on some form of medically assisted treatment and not use street drugs anymore and be okay. That is a trap that a lot of people find themselves in. It's heavily pushed by the medical industry at this point. Basically, swapping one opiate addiction for another is there, but they've also attempted it with alcohol, Vivitrol shots. And the old school antabuse, where if you take a pill and you drink in the next 3 or 4 days, you're going to be horribly, horribly ill. I was on antabuse. I drank on day 3. I know, because I had no defense, and it was not, it didn't work for me. So, or if if I can just get rid of the physical dependence by going through a detox or a withdrawal management, I'm going to be okay. We see people all the time. Detox, come out, use the same day. No clinical, no underlying causes and conditions. No, it's just another way to get stuck in the treatment mill, which in the end is just making money, for, corporate entities. Or if I do detox in 30 days, that will be long enough to break the cycle. And the whole epiphany, right? At the end, the only time that I could actually, get to a point was admitting complete defeat and knowing that not only did I have to physically detox safely and get some clinical treatment, but I had to follow that up with a lifelong program of action. So it's not the substance that is the problem. I had to break that mindset that it's the substance that is the problem, not my entire set of attitudes, emotions, and my entire outlook on life being flawed and being ingrained as habit for 20, 30, 35 years, And only when I approached this from that point of absolute surrender without any denial left was I able to actually put together a sustainable period of recovery. So, one of the things that was mentioned there was in the denial thing, I'm not affecting my family, or I'm not affecting my friends, or I'm not affecting my job. I'm only affecting myself by continuing on in my addiction, and that could not have been true, further from the truth. In my depression, in my personal experience, looking back over my long history, although I was physically present in the lives of my wife and my children, was I emotionally detached? Was I distant? Was I restless, irritable, and discontent? Was I angry and short-fused? Was I accusatory and blame throwing? And were my behaviors erratic and unpleasant around all this? Did I do my absolute best at work? Some of those promotions I may have missed. Was it my alcoholic mind telling me that I deserve them and got, basically, raked over the coals? Or did my actions and my addictions really, detract from my performance so that I didn't deserve them? All of that had to come to light eventually for me to accept my alcoholism and be content with whatever I had left as options in my life. But, the family is often, especially if somebody's in those early phases or levels of denial, they may not even know that they have a problem, or they think it's just a problem that they're dealing with on their own. But what are some of the things that, people that are close, family and employers, can look out for? Once again, there's plenty of clinical research on all of this, but these are things that I've personally experienced that were warning signs to those around me, So lethargy and depression, always being tired, still being depressed even when I was on antidepressants because I was taking massive quantities of depressant drugs. Being able to unshake out of that. Is that a definite telltale sign of addiction? No, of course not in all cases. But, in coupled with some of these other things or other reasonable suspicions, it might be. Violent mood swings. I was the master of these, when I was not using, because I was, once I entered recovery and for the first time in 98, I was never allowed to drink around my family again. So I had to do it on the sly, and I would go through long periods where I couldn't do that, so I'd become restless, irritable, almost violent. And then, I would get that instant relief from using in secret. And then I would get paranoid because, oh my God, what happens if I get caught now? And then I would become aggressive, or then I would separate myself from my family, the withdrawing from life. So I did things like plan business trips specifically so I could go out of town and drink the way that I wanted to when I was supposed to be in recovery. Beginning to miss important commitments, family commitments, not showing up, impaired performance or consequences at work, getting written up, not being able to make it to work on time, not being able to, taking too many days off, just blaming it on, being tired and depressed, other telltale signs. This didn't happen for me until my last run out there where I crossed some different drug boundaries, but, eventually running out of money for what I needed, and then things going missing, unexplained things going missing. By that point, I was pretty much on my own, and a lot of that was me basically selling my stuff. Sudden, intense, and unexpected financial problems. Okay, that can be a sign of many things, right? May not be a substance issue, could be a gambling issue. That's another addiction, guys. It's the same deal, right? And boy, do I have to be careful around things like gambling. As a person in recovery, it is so easy to swap, and I'll cover that in a little bit. Worsening issues with the law, criminal justice system, and this is not just DUIs and things, but getting caught with possession charges, doing stupid things, that were causing me to, have frequent encounters with the law. Being completely locked down and emotionally unavailable, seeking outside help in, to deal with my discomfort with myself by churning through relationships. Once I got divorced from my wife, there was a period of time where I was, actively, I was dry, but I felt entitled to be in a relationship. And in the end, relationships with other people that were actively using actually lit the green light for me to go back out again. Okay. And then once an addict, always an addict. And I could say this, it doesn't matter the substance. For me, it was alcohol and stimulants, and then whatever else I could put in my body to come down from the stimulants. But, at different times in my life, I have tried to, displace addictions. Whether it be with food, sex, gambling, intensely and overzealously participating in hobbies, being that ridiculously over-controlling parent, youth sports parent that was, thinking they were managing a future Hall of Famer, or an Olympic wrestler, all those dysfunctional behaviors, becoming addicted to all those other things were all ways that, things happened for me. So these are just, if you think a loved one might have, potentially a substance use problem going on, these are some of the things perhaps to look for, and maybe have a candid conversation with them about, what's really behind all this. I see X, Y, and Z, but this is not like you. What's really going on behind the scenes? Is there anything else you need to talk about? And if the addict is at the right, phase of those stages of denial, maybe there will be a momentary willingness for that to happen. So
just let me cut in quickly. Just for that, especially when you have family or people that are helping confront people with substance use disorders, I would also say that knowing whether or not you're the right person to confront that person, because there are times where you may have shared trauma, there may be trauma around the substance use disorder. So are you using it to convict them of something, or are you using it to help them get the help they need? So I think
extraordinary point.
Yeah, I think that's also a
Absolutely.
huge part to mitigate that as well.
Yeah, and one of the simple mantras in recovery circles is, you know, does it need to be said at all? Does it need to be said now? Does it need to be said by me? Okay, and practicing that pause, can prevent a lot of damage that might, otherwise happen. Sometimes the family can be too close to the situation, and that's where getting an outside, party that, is skilled at, intervention techniques, if there's reasonable suspicion that there is a substance problem, right? And today, in this day and age, with the opioid epidemic going on, and the enormous financial cost of maintaining an opioid addiction, sooner or later, there will be direct consequences that make it pretty clear of what's going on, right? So, in summary, this just kind of sums up those two categories of topics. The bottom line is this: the person that's affected with addiction, because of the mental aspect of the disease and that strong threat of denial, is often the last to really know, or more importantly, admit and seek help. And until the addict recognizes the problem and is willing to change everything, literally nothing will change. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And the other thing for the families is that there is no amount of love or financial support or guilting or anything like that that is going to motivate someone to get recovery. Nobody can fix an addict other than an addict that develops that sense of desperation and that willingness on their own part. So that was that. And just if there were questions, I wanted to make sure we put up Mercer Council's logo as part of this. But that was my little personal experience blended with some key points about addiction. I'll give it back to you, Ruth.
Well, thank you, Dave. That was really great. I also think that if anybody has any questions, they can put them in the chat as we go through these presentations, but also understand that especially when we're going through a substance use disorder, it can be very difficult for us to face our own realities. And that if people are coming to you and you don't think you have a problem, then knowing and trusting your loved ones is enough to be like, all right, maybe I do. So listening to the people who are very common and love you in your life are only doing it because they care about you so much. And that is an honor and a gift to have in the first place. So that is something that we can close on, at least for that section. For the next part, we have Brian Biddings. And Brian, I will be sharing this. I just want to make sure that we have the right one. And we do. Here we go. So Brian, do you want to talk about yourself a little bit?
Good afternoon, everyone. Brian Biddings, the patient navigator for the opioid overdose recovery program for Mercer Council. I began my recovery experience back in 2015. I would say that prior to that, the lie that I kept saying was I didn't have an alcohol or drinking problem. And so it was easy for me to lie to myself. And so it was even easier to lie to you for those that could see that I had a problem. My family kept saying, listen, that's enough, or put that down, or come on, man, not another one. But, what are you talking about? I'm at a party. This is what I'm supposed to do, And all through college, where I was a mixologist and I was getting paid to party, that's how I dubbed it. That's how I termed it. I was enjoying what I was supposed to enjoy during my college years, not realizing that my problem was growing and growing and growing. Then it became exacerbated once I got into the military. That's when things started going in the opposite direction really fast. And I wasn't making formation as I was supposed to. And if I made formation, I was leaning on someone else because they were helping me stand up straight, smelling like a pure liquor store. Because by this time of the day, mid-afternoon, high afternoon, I was already intoxicated, inebriated beyond the point of even trying to speak full and complete sentences. But once again, I wanted to go ahead and continue in this destructive behavior because that's what I was doing as a norm. I knew that this was something that I kept lying to myself about. I got this, I'll take care of it. Okay. You know what? I even had the bright idea that I won't drink during the day. I'll wait till I get off work. Not realizing that I'm still in full-blown active addiction. After the military, I landed a job in the federal government. And that was a challenge in itself because I'm working in a field where I'm dealing with substance use disorder and mental health. So co-occurring, it only taught me that, hey, you know what? Either you're going to stop lying or you're going to get called on your BS. Which one is it going to be? And gratefully, that magic day in 2015, when the God of my understanding took that bottle out of my hands and said, enough's enough. I tried it on my own, and every lie that I kept saying to myself and to others was proven ineffective. I will not getting better, but actually getting worse. And so at the expense of my family, at the expense of my friends, at the expense of jobs, I came to the realization that I cannot do this alone. I don't have the power to do this. So I turned my will over to God. And gratefully, I'm sober today. So we're going to talk about the recovery experience. And I want this to be as interactive as possible. So please feel free to jump in with questions, comments, concerns, because the recovery experience from my viewpoint is going to be different from your recovery experience. We're going to unpack that as we move down the line through these slides and through conversation. We're going to talk about addiction, and a lot of the talking points that I have Dave already highlighted. So you're going to hear some of this same useful information again. So addiction starts with the non-use, progressively moving to the use, rapidly moving to the abuse, and then you're in full-blown addiction. Addiction is a pathological relationship to any mood, mind-altering experience with life-damaging consequences. And I think we need to pause for a minute there and look at the last part of that, okay? Because the slide where it says life-damaging consequences is just that. There, in my experience, in my recovery experience, I have not made a single progression continuing in my active addiction. I've lost family, I've lost friends, I've tried to patch up or repair the damage that I've done, but the damaging consequences were the common denominator. Everything I put my hands on either fell apart or exploded right in front of me. Addiction is the continued repetition of behavior despite adverse consequences or a neurological impairment leading to such behaviors. Continued repetition, called insanity. I am going to continue to do what I'm doing, but looking for a different result every time I do it. It's not going to happen. The damaging consequences are either going to look like I've lost this, I've literally burned this up, or I've gotten to the point where people they don't want to associate with me anymore. Because I've damaged that relationship. I've severed that relationship. Addiction is considered an obsession and a compulsion. Addiction can include, but are not limited to, drug and alcohol abuse, exercise, food addiction, sexual addiction, gambling, electronic, as we are now in the, well, not now, but we've been in the electronic age for some time, but everything is now digitized. And so that is becoming an addiction for some who are working on resolution in that form of addiction.
Just a quick thing, Brian. Especially when we're going back to addiction, a lot of people think that substance use disorders, especially like addiction and substance use disorders, are the same thing. And I'd like to reiterate that they're not, that there are definitely stages, and addiction happens to be the last stage of a substance use disorder. So obviously there are many different points of intervention before we reach the stage of complete dependence on a body. All right, continuing on.
I want to highlight that recovery is not just about getting sober. It's about building and enjoying a better life for yourself in sobriety. Getting sober was a challenging part of my recovery, but how do I learn now to live a better quality of life while in sobriety? I can't go back to what I was doing. I can't go back to the people, places, and things that I knew, because guess what? That was part of my active addiction. Now I have to learn to live a better quality of life in my newly developed sobriety. So we're going to talk more about what that looks like during my recovery experience. And then by all means, like I said, we're going to keep this interactive. If anyone wants to share a recovery experience that they may have of themselves or know of someone that's going through the recovery experience, please chime in. So as you can see, recovery is moving in one direction. The arrow is moving in one direction, and it's pointing to a lifestyle where we want to improve from where we were to where we are, and looking forward with anticipation to where we're going.
I think, Brian, one of the quotes that is become very popular these days is that, recovery is not about putting down, the substance. Recovery is about building an entirely new life where it is easier not to use. Okay. It's not guaranteed, but it becomes choosable, whereas before we had no choice. So I think that was a great point, Brian. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I think, David, the point that you make also can be related to anything traumatic that happens. In the world, we go through things, we go through hard experiences, and we just have to be the person that we are after the trauma or after the addiction or after the substance use disorder, because there are just realities that are different now. Our brains are different, our lives are different, the people around us are different.
Yes.
So just being the person after is the most important part.
I agree. You see a set of keys. In the recovery community, we refer to them as keys or toolbox. And so the keys to any recovery experience include healthy coping skills, appropriate strategies utilized to get through challenging times, whether internal or external triggers may be part of those challenging times. What am I feeling? What am I thinking? And what am I doing? What is it that's causing me to think about, to feel this, to contemplate that? During the recovery experience, you want to find something that brings you joy, peace, or motivation. Find something comforting, like essential oils or even a breathing exercise. Keep it simple. Find something that relieves any cravings, like exercise, yoga, meditation, prayer. I have a recovery dog. She is what I consider a coping skill, a healthy coping skill, because even though she's a recovery dog, a rescue dog, I should say, she is part of my recovery. In actuality, she rescued me. Individuals who have been successful in overcoming their dependence to anything usually refer to this as their new lifestyle in recovery. I highlight and really just expound on that everyone's recovery experience is different and it's unique. Yes, Dave and I are both individuals, professionals, men in recovery, but his recovery experience is unique because of Dave's lived experience. My recovery experience is unique because of my lived experience. So everyone's recovery experience, and it doesn't necessarily have to be recovery from drugs and alcohol, like we stated previously. It can be from a gambling addiction, food addiction, work addiction. We can recover from sports injuries, financial setbacks, and challenging relationships. We can recover from them as well. Any recovery is challenging and it's not easy, but if you put in the work consistently and intentionally, you will see the benefits. So I want to look at the word recovery. In SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Association defines recovery as a process of change through which people improve their health and wellness, live self-directed lives, and strive to reach their full potential. My recovery experience looks like humility, gratitude, growing with like-minded individuals, giving away more than I acquired, doing what's hard to do, teamwork, being receptive to learning new things, being receptive to learning something new every day, and being willing to change. Let's look at what an experience is. We all have had experiences. This is an experience that we're experiencing right now. Merriam-Webster definition of experience is something personally encountered, undergone, or lived through. The recovery experience, once again, is personalized. It should include fun, enjoyable activities, and personal rewards that are pleasurable. What do you enjoy doing? If you need to take time to discover or rediscover what it is that you enjoy doing, that's part of your recovery experience. If you had a passion for automobiles like I do, if you had a passion for putting projects together, gardening, culinary, rediscover that passion as part of your recovery experience.
Brian, quick question. Would you also say that recovery experiences, at least in my interactions, is that I also think it's important to understand the cultural ramifications of what a recovery experience looks like, because you may lose friends that are upset that you're in recovery, or you may have family that, I know I'm Hispanic, so alcohol is really a place that's just around all the time, especially at parties. So that recovery experience also has the good parts, but I think it's also understanding that the bad parts may come, or the ramifications of your addiction may also come across that as well.
That's a good point, Ruth. So half of my family is Hispanic as well. And attending any type of family function, there's going to be alcoholic beverages there. But as a person in recovery, I'm not allowed to participate in that, because that's the standards. Those are the set of rules that I have placed on myself in recovery. I'm not bending, I'm not twisting, I'm not turning, nor am I negotiating. But I put that information out to my loved ones and my friends that now I'm living a different life. I'm living a life of recovery. And this is my recovery experience. I'm no longer permissible to drink alcoholic beverages. I'm not going to disassociate. I'm not going to isolate. But I'm not able to partake. And so with that being said, I recognize that because of my background, my heritage, my lineage, I am no longer able to participate in that aspect of those social functions, because I'm a person in recovery, and my family respects that. And like I spoke about previously, the people, places, and things that I was associated with or at, I no longer am associated, because those triggers, those external factors are no longer able to persuade me into drinking any longer. I disassociate, and I did it respectfully, because whether or not you wanted to hear my message, that was your choice, but I gave it regardless. I needed to let you know I'm no longer a drinking buddy or a person that can party at different times or at random times. I'm now a responsible person in recovery, because this is the life that I've chose during my recovery experience.
I think, Brian, you hit on two really important points there. For me, from my personal experience, by the time I first decided to try to put the alcohol down, which was always my primary substance, of issue, it was the alpha and the omega. It's what I started on. It's what caused most of the problems. Everything else was ancillary, right? There was nothing but a collective sigh of relief from family and friends that I was at least finally trying to do something, because I was a hot mess when I drank, especially after years of drinking and starting to have the physical variances of tolerance, where I could either drink enough to put a village under the table, or I'd have 4 or 5 beers and I'd be blackout, angry, drunk, right? I became completely erratic and unpredictable. And that is what happens in later stages, especially of alcoholism, right? Wild variation of tolerance and everything else. So I had nothing, but solid feedback from those around me. Unfortunately, I disappointed those people by continuously relapsing on and off for a period of many years, and their trust and their, anytime there was a suspicion, even when I wasn't drinking, I hadn't graduated into that, new person yet that could recognized that they had a right to feel that way and be suspicious, without taking it personally. And I often use that as a justification. Well, they're accusing me anyway. I might as well go back out and get drunk, right?
Right.
So those things it were a barrier to my recovery early on. But the other thing that was drilled into my head when I finally got serious about recovery is that recovery, as you said, is our own personal business. It is our responsibility. It is our legacy to maintain it. Any recovery that is based on any assumptions about others modifying their behavior to meet our needs in recovery is just the same sick, ego-driven thinking that drove our active alcoholism and addiction. We need to recover without any expectation of change of behavior on any other part of those around us, because for many, this problem that we share does not exist, right? So good points, Brian.
Oh, thank you, Dave. Thanks for your feedback. Just to being mindful of the time, I want to talk briefly about the SAMHSA's 8 Dimensions of Wellness here, because it's, we're in May, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. The 8 Dimensions of Wellness speaks on the emotional, environmental, intellectual, physical, occupational, spiritual, social, and financial aspects that are important to individuals that have mental health and substance use disorder to improve their quality and longevity of their life. SAMHSA once again has defined the 10 guiding principles that support the recovery definition. Recovery emerges from hope. It's person-driven, occurs via many pathways. It's holistic, supported by peers and allies, supported through relationship and social networks, culturally based and influenced. It's supported by addressing trauma. Recovery involves individual, family, and community strengths and responsibility. Most importantly, recovery is based on respect.
I love that. Also, Brian, I did want to point out that while we're sort of looking at the recovery process, that a lot of people see addiction as just a disease or an illness, but I think that a lot of people really should understand holistically that it also can be used as a coping skill. It can be used as an environmental factor. There are a lot of different areas and layers to it, that it's not just a disease. It's not just the person that it comes from. It's a lot more than that. And for us to understand that could really help us understand how we can help those in our lives that are suffering from substance use disorders.
You know what, Ruth? And see, conversations like what we're doing now allows that door to be open to get that education that you need. Because if I don't know something, but I've either assumed, heard, or fed off of someone who gave me some information, and I run with that, then I'm going to be right where I'm at, stuck with the same thoughts that I'm having, because it was fed to me from an outside source. But without doing my part in getting educated to then knowing more and growing more, then guess what? What you're saying is valid.
Absolutely.
I know for me that, I always get a kick whenever I look at the 8 dimensions of wellness, and one of the things that drove my ongoing struggles from 1998 through, early 2016 was the fact that my substance use had impacts on some of those areas, 8 dimensions of wellness, but not on all of them. I still had reasonable financial security for most of that period. I, still had my career. I still had, the props and trappings of being a functional person in society on the outside. I had plausible deniability that I had a true life-threatening problem that was just one step away from crashing through that glass floor and hitting new levels of bottom, and until I did that, let me tell you, that last run, at the end of it, I look at those 8 dimensions of wellness. I had 0 active dimensions of wellness in my life.
Yep.
And it's no surprise that this formed a more solid base for my recovery this time. Because for me, if I had had one of those dimensions of wellness that was still in pretty good shape, it could have given me the necessary intellectual fuel to say, I'm not that bad yet, or I have one more dalliance left in me. and a dalliance would end up being ended up being a 3.5-year run. So where all the glass floors were shattered, right? So, but yeah, really important to remember that addressing even some of those dimensions, you can't attack all those dimensions of wellness at once early on in recovery, but that's why most of us follow a recovery program that involves, a process where there's steps in order, right? And if we do them, we will deal with some of the immediate ones like the emotional wellness first. And then later on, we can't expect all the financial damage to be repaired on day one of sobriety, right?
Right.
But down the road, if we stay the course, these things will become well again and whole again, at least to the extent of our new reality.
Right. No, that's a very good and valid point. And so for me, all the 8 stages, for me, they were there, and then all of a sudden they were starting to fade. And then one would go away. Then, here comes another. Then the financial portion of it became challenged. And the social became non-existent. So all of it, like you said, there was nothing left. But for me, building it back one at a time, one would feed off of the other, or build on the other, I should say. And so I needed to understand that everything that I thought I still had while my active addiction was rapidly depleting, now I'm confident and comfortable with it coming back in stages. Because if it comes back too soon, I might get back on that pink cloud and say, hey, I got it now.
I also think that when you have the different areas of wellness, it also can be associated with, especially in like prevention education and in the field that we're in right now, we usually say the opposite of addiction is connection. And I think that is really true in that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. It's making sure that you have connections to the 8 spheres of wellness to make sure that whatever grounding you have, you can use those safe spaces to keep your grounding. So I just find that as an interesting point as well. So did we want to play this now?
Yeah, so there's a brief clip that I found that this was relevant for today's presentation. I myself have enjoyed this movie in every aspect that you can think of. If you have not seen The Shawshank Redemption, it's on my recommendation list. But once again, the reason that we're showing this video clip is just to show this conversation and the value it brings in giving an important message for someone to consider.
Okay.
Down there, and you're in here, and that's the way it is.
Yeah, right. That's the way it is. It's down there, and I'm in here. It's down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living, or get busy dying.
It's always a powerful one for me. I always appreciate that.
Because in recovery, the recovery experience, whatever that may look like for you, you have a choice. And so with that choice, what are you going to do? Are you going to get busy living? Or are you going to continue on that destructive path in addiction, and I'm talking about me, where everything is going to give you the same results, just on a different day? Are these results going to motivate you for change or keep you stagnant in where you are? And once again, I'm talking about my lifestyle before becoming a person in recovery. The same days kept happening, Monday through Friday. And then Saturday and Sunday, forget about it. They were a blur because I was so drunk by Friday mid-afternoon. Saturday and Sunday didn't even exist. And here comes Monday again, trying to recoup, go back to work. I had to make a choice. I'm sorry, go ahead. So we're talking about the signs and symptoms of alcohol, of addiction. Sudden changes in appetite and appearance, insomnia. You also have paranoia, using to feel normal or using no matter what. They spoke about that previously. You're already going to go ahead and name me and tag me as as an alcoholic, I'm gonna drink, so I'm just gonna drink no matter what. I'm just gonna keep going where I'm going. Uses to continue or increases despite problems with health, law, education, finances, parental, and other responsibilities. That was me all day. I kept going and going, thinking that I could work out this situation, this problem, this challenge while still under the influence, not paying attention to my health, still having involvements with the law, ignoring my education, depleting my finances, not being the parent that I should have been, and responsibilities. My only responsibility was to make sure that I helped the liquor store open that gate early in the morning. And I was gonna, assist them once again by closing the gate at nighttime. That was my responsibility. I figured, listen, I'm spending money here. I might as well go ahead and help you guys out. Maybe you'll toss me about. Another sign and symptom of addiction is can't stop, and there's a lack of control. And here we go again, as Dave pointed out earlier, denial. The lies, the manipulation, the isolation. I'm telling you, I told the best lies because you know what? I told them to me first. I was the one who rehearsed them in my mind, tried them out with me, and it made sense. It made sense. I'm not drunk. No, I haven't been drinking. So I just got finished drowning myself with Listerine, the strongest antiseptic that I could think of that was I could use, that you couldn't smell it. I kept cologne in the glove box, but then it got to the point where I said to myself, you know what? If they don't see me, they don't know, right? So I stayed away. Withdrawal symptoms. For me, it was the shakes. For me, there was a lot of blackouts, but the shakes were the ones that the lies kept coming. Well, if I drink some more, maybe the shakes will go away. That didn't work out too well. Taking risks one normally wouldn't take. The roll of the dice every time. You're gambling. It's a complete and utter gamble. Parental, social, and recreational sacrifices. For me, I chose to drink and ignore the parental, social, and recreational. I didn't at some point didn't say drinking became first and foremost in my life. So the question is, why does someone use drugs and or alcohol?
Well, I think that's a very personal question, right? Especially when you have someone with a substance use disorder. There are so many things and so many factors that people can use it for. And I think that's kind of the point, that addiction is so personal, that because it's so personal, there are so many ways that it can be mitigated and can be intervened with.
This opportunity to share with Dave, to be with Ruth and the other participants today. Yes, we are under a time constraint, and I'm trying to be respectful of the time. This conversation is something that's ongoing. There's so much that we could talk about just on one topic alone. We could take denial and run that, because it's going to look different from different contributors to that conversation. We have experienced denial on different levels. And so, like I said, I want to just once again reiterate that this is my recovery experience, highlighting what I have done during the process of recovery, because I'm still in that process. The recovery experience is happening right now. My recovery experience is happening right now because I'm able to be on a platform with the rest of you professionals discussing what drugs and alcohol, recovery experience, or any other addiction looks like, how we can address it, how we can work through it, and link appropriate people with the resources and help that's available. So we're going to talk briefly about youth turning to substance use. Once again, the lack of control, the inconsistency in life, lack of permanence, lack of attachments, emotional and or mental challenges. And there I put self-medicating, because that's often what takes place. I think I can, drown this out. I'm feeling some type of way. I'm just going to go ahead and just drown this out right now. And it could be eating, it could be sex, it could be, video games, or it could be drugs and alcohol. Abuse, violence experienced, trauma, fear, peer pressure, loneliness, altered feelings, mood, emotions, thinking patterns, known in the recovery world as stinking thinking, habitual despite the consequences, or coping skills, family behavior, family history, learned behavior, and repeat circumstances.
Hello? Brian, can you hear me? You
Yeah, I
good?
can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I didn't know if we lost you for a second.
No, I'm still here.
Okay. All right, so we have this. And yeah, so we're gonna move on.
Yeah, we're
Things
going to
you can
move on
do.
to the next slide.
Yeah,
What things,
okay.
things you can do? First and foremost, educate, inform yourself and them. If you don't know, educate yourself. Don't just get stuck in that pattern of, well, it's got to be what it is. No, it's not. It is what it is. Educate yourself and inform. Provide resources. Have those open and honest discussions. It's going to get hot sometimes. Those conversations are going to get heated. Have them in a comfortable, safe place. Listen. Active listening. Be available. Don't just say, let's sit down and have a conversation, but your mind and behavior mimics you're somewhere else. If you're going to be present 100%. Let them know that you care. Be that one light in their life. Be the inspiration. Encourage them to talk, open conversation when they are ready. To force feed and or to pry open to get great information, I've tried it. It's not gonna work. Encourage them to do positive activities they enjoy and keep encouraging, keep reinforcing and highlighting their strengths. Provide or support coping skills, especially ones dealing with physical and emotional pain. Keep an eye out for paraphernalia. It's changing daily, changing daily. Colleague of mine, Melissa, we were having a random conversation about vaping, and I had told her that I was out in the community. I had seen what looked like a normal digital watch. It, in fact, was a vape device. Keep an eye out because it's changing. Technology is changing. The paraphernalia is starting to coincide with the technology. These gadgets and gadgets are now being accessible to our younger generation, and they're finding it. They're savvy in locating things because of the digital world that we live in. Monitor their medication use if applicable. Safely dispose of prescription meds. I've highlighted the last three in red because these are paramount. You have to take the problem seriously. Do not sweep it under the rug. Don't think it's going to get better tomorrow if we ignore it today. Take it seriously. Seek help at first signs. Don't wait until it gets worse or pretend that there isn't something going on. Hey, if you see something, say something, speak up. Have that open conversation. Be intentional in that conversation. And then briefly, there's some resources, of course, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, AANA, the ORC program, Dave, myself, and Ruth, and some of the participants on here are associated with City of Angels, Recovery Advocates. These are all useful, established organizations, agencies to assist with useful resources.
Yeah, these resources will also be listed in the description below if you're watching this on the YouTube channel. So if you're looking for anything, including the resources or any sort of useful information, we'll be putting it down in the description.
And you know what? Please understand that there's always help, but go get the help. Seek the help, go get the help. It's there. And then lastly, you know, if I do what I've always done, I will get what I've always gotten. But if I don't like what I've always gotten, what will I do differently? You have a choice. What will you do differently? And so, you know, in closing, I do want to, you know, highlight and just say thank you for this opportunity to collaborate with Dave and to, you know, share this time with Ruth and the other participants that are with us today, and the viewers that are going to watch this YouTube channel later on. This is a conversation that can take place anytime, any day, because we are still dealing with substance use disorder. We're still dealing with addiction on different levels. We have youth, adolescents, younger generation that either we are working with directly or indirectly. And once again, these conversations can be had by creating a safe space and a safe place to have these. Because without those conversations, what are we going to do? We're going to do what we've been doing, relying on what we have done in the past, but trying to get different results.
So we actually have a question. I don't know if we actually addressed this or not. Omar did ask, what was the most important thing on the road to recovery? I guess we should have those lasting thoughts right before we head out. So anything you guys would like to say?
Well, I actually answered it in the chat, but I wasn't
Okay.
sure if that was going to, you know, make it through in terms of the YouTube recording.
Totally
But,
fine.
you know, so for me, so I could just reread it briefly. I said, you know, as far as the most important thing, you know, for me, given my history, you know, and hitting a series of very high bottoms, I always had a reservation that I was as bad as, you know, a true alcoholic, which in my mind, even in recovery, was still the guy homeless, you know, under the bridge with a dirty trench coat and a bottle and a brown bag, right? So I said, for me personally, no sustainable recovery could happen until I was willing to absolutely 100% admit complete defeat and totally surrender. That connected me with a 12-step program. The 12-step program, by actually doing the work, not just by attending, connected me with a power greater than myself that I could draw on to regain the power of choice if I remained willing. And really, the whole goal of, and net result of doing the 12 steps of a 12-step program is to connect to a higher power that will restore my ability to choose. When I'm in active addiction and I'm not in recovery mode, I've lost the power of choice. It's that simple, you know, and without connection to a power greater than me, I will not be able to regain that choice or maintain that power of choice. And that's the basis. Anything else that we do that Brian talked about in terms of expanding and enriching our lives in recovery is ultimately comes down to that one critical decision. Do I have the power of choice to remain abstinent under any and all circumstances today? By myself, I don't, okay? By the power that I connected to through a 12-step program, which happened to work for me, I do. As long as I maintain that connection, like my life literally and does depend on it.
Also, yeah, for me, it's my faith in God. And so I've, you know, I had an affair. And that affair was including alcohol. My personal relationship with God was now an affair with alcohol and choosing, do I want to be committed to that shiny God, or do I want to live the life that God himself has designed and laid out for me? And like Dave clearly said, I had to 100% admit complete defeat. There was no other feasible way that I could figure out how I'm going to make this work on my own or through my own volition. It wasn't happening. Once I figured that out, once I completely said, I'm done, took my hands off of it, that's when the miracle took place. And so through Celebrate Recovery, I'm now staying connected with like-minded people and remaining sober today.
Definitely. Well, thank you for sharing, both of you. I appreciate your time. If you guys would like to send me any resources I can put in the description or anything, including you know, any tips or anything, I can also put that in the description as well. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for viewing this. Next week, we'll be talking about social media as a drug and how it interacts with youth today. So we look forward to that. And Amy Argerio and Shakita Johnson will be doing that for us next week. So thank you all.
It'll be a good
and-
one.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
That one.
Yep. So it'll be good conversation next week. And thank you all for being here and have a wonderful, wonderful week.